I appreciate the opportunity to talk about PEM. And for some of you at the start with PEM and AASHTO PP84, if you're familiar on the fringes or haven't heard of it, sometimes people merge those two and treat them as synonyms. They are not, and as we go through this, hopefully you'll see, but PP84 is actually one of the products from under the PEM initiative. Let's talk about change, and it's time for a change. And we need to accept and realize in our business, we're horrible with change. And a little look at our history will bring this out. If we look at the time frame for widespread use of supplementary cementitious materials here in the highway sector, the Romans figured it out 2,000 years ago. We figured it out in the mid-'80s. 28-day strength testing. We test concrete at 28 days based on the strength gain curve of straight Portland cement. Well, these days, the vast majority of mixes contain SCMs that don't set up as fast, don't gain strength as quickly, but we hold our industry to that same 28-day requirement, forcing them to over-cement their mixes, giving us mixes that are more crack-prone, not as durable, and we do it to ourselves because we're wed to these specs and test methods that we won't change. And Gordon mentioned the slump test. Again, the slump test may have some applicability in a QC arena for contractors, but the vast majority of agencies use it in their acceptance program when the slump test has no correlation to the quality of the concrete. And again, nobody can point to a bridge or a pavement and say, that lasted 10 years shorter than it should have because the slump was a ½ inch out of spec. Yet we still rely on that test. And then the evolution of concrete testing. In 1922, we got the slump test, and you can see what cars looked like then. And moving up a couple decades, we got the Type B pressure meter. Again, automotive technology advanced some. And in the early 80s, we got the rapid chloride test. And again, automotive technologies advanced, certainly since the 40s. But about 1981 there, that's really the last testing innovation that states have made a routine or incorporated into their quality assurance programs. And how many industry segments can you think of that still operate with the same technology from the early 80s? What did your cell phone look like in the early 80s? What did your computer look like in the early 80s? But we still operate with this technology for a couple of reasons. One is we're just wed to it, and as I said, we don't like to change. But two is the state of our technology. And now the research community has given us some new tools and tests that we can take advantage of. And that's why the time is right now for a change. And hopefully by the end of my slides, you will agree with me. What is PEM all about? Well, again, it's figuring out what makes concrete last, how does it fail, and then specify our concrete around those failures and avoiding those failures. And my third bullet there, talking about a performance-driven QA specification. And what that looks like in a spec form is removing the prescriptive requirements and allowing industry to innovate. And we'll talk some more about this again through the presentation. Incorporating some of the new technologies that more adequately assess the long-term durability of our concrete mixes. And then changing, we can't just allow industry to innovate and remove all the controls and take away all our specifications. We need to figure out how to operate in that environment. And I've got a couple slides later on that will kind of compare and contrast a performance approach with the prescriptive approach that has been typical in our business. This is the group that put this together. And again, I won't run through everybody's name, but you see certainly several of the leading researchers in this country. The real key is down at the bottom. We had our team of experts that kind of developed PP84 and kind of set the stage to move this forward. But it's the key folks are really at the bottom, a lot of the practitioner groups. And that we had a number of champion states, ACPA, PCA, NRMCA, and a number of other industry organizations that supported this. And I think that's a real key concept. As Monica noted in the opening about the collaborative approach and collaboration. And this is not a government initiative that we're looking to force on the industry to drive this change. This is something that makes sense to the industry as well. And again, hopefully you'll see that through these slides. PP84, I mentioned I'm not going to run through all the tests and all the tables that are in there, but as I said on the previous slide, we want to require the things that matter. Look at where do we have performance issues with concrete. And you could run down this list, and these are the 6 categories. And I put an asterisk on that bottom one because you might say, but Mike, you said you're not a big fan of the slump test. Why do you have workability in here? And workability is there specifically not reflecting the slump test, but we do have a couple new tests that are in PP84, the box test and the V. Kelly, that are applicable to slip form concrete. There are also other workability tests, I'll say very near ready, that are still in the research process. So there will be more coming, but we wanted to include a workability requirement because when you look at the first 5, as these specifications get developed and industry adapts, and these will get worked into specifications and ultimately pay factors. And we didn't want the sole focus to be on a mix that will obtain good test results, but maybe not be a mix that the crews could work with and get properly placed and consolidated in the field. So we wanted to have workability be a part of it, even though it's not necessarily a final indicator of performance, but it will help, say, rein the other ones in and keep everything in a proper perspective as this advances to full implementation. This is a guide. It's not a mandate. And it says the second bullet allows DOTs to take what they like. And if you've ever seen Dr. Lay speak about this, he likes to put up pictures of a Chinese buffet lunch, and that you pick a little bit from here and a little bit from there. Take what makes sense to you. Not everything that's in PP84 is going to make sense in every state and every environmental exposure condition. And the other thing, the third bullet, don't give up what you already know. You will see suggested specification limits in PP84. Those are the suggested limits on a national basis, from that group of folks on the earlier slide. It's not intended to be state specific, and it is specifically intended to be modified by the states. And to drive that point home just a little bit, it's a slide I stole from Dr. Lay. It's not designed to be used without modifying it for local practice and experience. It's supposed to be a guide to a process and an approach and kind of a conceptual mindset to how you put your mixes together and what you require. It is not intended to be a cut and paste specification. This should be a familiar face. I think you saw Jerry not too long ago. Jerry and I were on a conference agenda in Wisconsin several years ago, and we were both speaking about PEM. And to this point, the PEM and the PP84 component of it really focuses on the M, the mixture part, the tests that go with that mixture. And there is more to the picture of a performance spec. And Jerry was up speaking at this conference, and he said this quote, and I almost jumped out of my chair. I was so excited that this really is the core of what a performance specification is all about. Agencies letting the industry innovate and deliver the product that we're asking for, and the contractors delivering it. And that really brings up, I think, an interesting perspective on this is how do contractors deliver in a performance specification versus a prescriptive? Now, if we look at, you talk to the quality people and the quality gurus, quality and consistency go hand in hand, and particularly for concrete paving. We need a consistent product. So where does variability come from in our world with the quality of our concrete? Well, here are the 4 sources. Each of these impacts the variability that we get in our final product. Now, we on the owner side, the agency side, put a lot of controls in place to deal with the sampling and testing variability. And you can see them here, several of these, the middle 3 bullets are all linked to the federal regulations on quality assurance. And states are required to do these activities, to use federal funds on their projects. But you can see a lot of time and effort goes into dealing with sampling and testing variability. And I want to throw this in, understand with all that effort, this is from a type B pressure pot. If you get a 5.5% air content, the real amount of air is somewhere between 4.9 and 6.1. And that's all we can say. That's the variability inherent in that test. And I threw this in there because as states and industry look at some of the new tests, if you run a super air meter one time and get a 0.24 and run it again on the same concrete and get a 0.26, it doesn't mean that it's a bad test. It doesn't mean it's a defective device. It just put it in the context of understanding the testing variability and compare it to the level of variability that we're dealing with now. Newer tests that better assess the concrete, don't necessarily mean they have less variability. So that's the testing part, sampling and testing. How do we deal with material and process, which is where we can have a heck of a lot of variability, and that's the part of this equation that the contractor can control. Right? They are 100% in control of the process, what they do to the material to get it, process it, and put it in place. And how they do this and the approach they have to take is different depending on the kind of specification. Under a prescriptive spec that we have historically used, and that's why most state DOTs have a specification book somewhere between 2 and 3 inches thick, because it's based on the past experience. Every time something goes wrong, 2 or 3 more pages in the spec book, because we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. And if you talk to those of us in the public sector, we will say we're absolutely in favor of innovation. We're all for it, but we write our prescriptive specifications and our bidding environment in ways that make it very difficult for contractors to truly innovate. And it requires the agency to have manpower and the skill set, because we have this 3-inch spec book with all these requirements. Somebody has to make sure those are met. And agencies, I think, as everyone knows, don't have the same depth and breadth of knowledge and experience that they've historically had. There are still a lot of very good people on the agency side, but not enough to operate the way we always have. And contrast that to a performance approach where the agency specifies what we want. And if you see there's some training videos you may see on these that kind of compare a performance spec to a potato chip manufacturing. We don't tell the potato chip company how hot to cook their potatoes, how much salt. We just tell them we want a good tasting potato that's crisp and all the other things we like about potato chips. And that's the mindset we want with concrete. We want to tell our industry, here's what we want our concrete to be. You figure out a way to provide it to us. So the contractor controls that and gives them the maximum ability to innovate. And it also lightens the oversight burden on the agency, because now we don't have to enforce every step of the spec book that mandated how everything was done along the way. We focus on the performance properties that tell us whether or not we will have a durable concrete. And part of that is I'll say the evolution and the rise and the importance of quality control. There are a number of states out there now that have QC requirements, but QC under a prescriptive approach really isn't terribly important. I mean, it's important, but it's not critical, because the agency, through the specification, is dictating the entire process. When that's removed, it's the QC program, and how we kind of look at it through the PEM lens is it's sort of writing a specification in reverse. We're asking our contractor and our supplier, you tell us how you're going to give us a good quality product. And PP84 acknowledges the role. It requires an approved QC plan with these items in it. And I'll talk on the next slide just a little bit more about how that parallels design build. And it requires QC testing and control charts. And our vision is, again, that the industry on a daily, weekly project, it'll vary state by state how agencies want to do this, but keeping the agency informed on the quality of the product via the QC testing. And again, I don't think that is very common practice right now. I think the slides are stuck. Monica or somebody, can you give me a hand with the slides?
Yeah, Mike, this is Carl. I'm just trying to adjust it. Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a black screen now, Carl.
Yeah, somehow it went out of full screen mode, but it's about to come back to you. Hold on a second.
Okay, I can see it now. Let's see the
All right, you should
arrow.
have it now. Sorry about that.
Okay. It mirrors the design build experience as how we're going to treat quality control. And I think Florida has some experience with design build, but design build shifts control from the agency to the contractor, and some of the risk shifts with that. But in our world, the agency retains responsibility and accountability to the taxpayers. So we can't turn this over and do kind of turnkey projects. On a design build project, the contractor submits in their proposal how they will develop and deliver the project. And then assuming they're the selected vendor, they submit a detailed QC plan. And with a performance spec, it's very much that same mindset. Is if we can have these detailed QC plans on design build projects, why would we on the agency side turn our backs on that and not take advantage of them, for all of our projects? And again, I said the agencies don't have the same depth and breadth of experience that they've always had. But sort of concurrent with that fall off is the industry side is much more capable and technically savvy and technically knowledgeable than they were 50, 60, 70 years ago when all these prescriptive specs were developed. So we're kind of foolish on the agency side if we don't figure out a way to leverage the knowledge and skill set that exists with our industry. Say it's a sort of a QC evolution, and the things that go with it, changing some states' mindset that QC is not its business. Because again, the PEM vision would be that the agency is engaged in some level of oversight of the contractor's QC operations, because the contractor is going to be providing data and information to the state on the quality of the project as it moves on. And I'll say the Gordon Smith example. Gordon and I were on an agenda in Texas together a few years ago, and Gordon was ahead of me, and he stood up in front of the group, and there were maybe a dozen state DOT reps in that audience. And Gordon asked, what's the single most important thing for quality of concrete pavement? And again, as you heard, Gordon is a very long-term, experienced, knowledgeable person in the concrete paving business. And his answer was the consistent operation of the paver. And that kind of set me up perfectly, because when I got up to speak and we were introducing PEM to the group, I asked the states, how many of you have anything in your specification about consistent operation of the paver? And no one did. And so again, the vision with this is in the QC plan, we would expect the contractor to tell us, here's what we're going to do to maintain consistent paver operation. So hopefully you're starting to see the flavor of kind of how this will evolve. And we also have to change some folks in the industry's mindset that QC is not their business. There is a segment of the industry we deal with who says, tell me what you want to put in the truck. I will mix it up, deliver it to you where you want it. I'll dump it, pay me and walk away. And again, we don't want to leave those folks behind. We want to very much bring them along with PEM. And so we're reaching out, we're doing some things as Gordon touched on, but this is really kind of new for the Federal Highway Administration. Because historically, we have always viewed the state agencies as our primary customer, and that's where we've put our resources, as to developing tools and technical assistance for states. What PEM has brought is this realization that the industry is a key participant in a performance specification. And we on the public agency side have a very vested interest in the industry having that skill set to deliver under a performance specification. So we're putting our resources into developing some tools. As Gordon mentioned, we're hoping very shortly to have a model QC plan for highway infrastructure, complete with guidance on how to incorporate that, some suggestions for agencies and how to use that in specifications, along with control chart tools to benefit both the industry as well as inform the agency. And following up on that, I mentioned PP84 is not intended to be a cut and paste kind of specification. We're going to be developing something that is. We will show, here's what we envision a model spec to be that properly incorporates some of the new technologies along with this modernized approach or enhanced quality control. Gordon mentioned the pooled fund, and again, I wanted to reinforce this, that third bullet. This pooled fund, when we were first sort of conceiving of PEM and thinking of how to move this forward, we were on the phone call to set this pooled fund up, and my office put in $1 million. And we had a collection of state agencies who put in a little over $1 million combined. And when the light bulb really went off for me, and I thought this really has a chance to go somewhere, is when the industry folks, and you see some of them on this slide, when they stepped up and collectively put in $1 million. So when industry is going to step up with that kind of financial support, along with the significant technical support, there are a number of folks who spend a lot of time and effort working on this PEM initiative from the industry side. So again, it is not a government initiative that we're forcing on the industry. This is very much a collaborative approach that will benefit both sides of the coin. I think Gordon showed this slide, the pooled fund participant. Whoops, sorry. I added these stars on here. The stars, one of the things we did, the Federal Highway Administration, we made up to $100,000 available to states in the pooled fund to try a pilot project and try to demonstrate some of the new tests and try some new QC procedures. The states with the stars are ones that have participated. I now have final reports in from North Carolina, New York, Iowa. I have a partial report in from Minnesota. I would say in South Dakota as well. Overwhelming success, I think, in the projects to date. These reports will all be available if they're not already, again, on the CP Tech website. And if you're interested in them, certainly contact me. I'd be glad to share them with you. I gave a similar talk to this, a regional conference in Pennsylvania a couple of years ago. And when I got done, one of the state reps came up to me on at break and said, "But Mike, you're asking for a lot of change." And my response was, the change has already happened. It's how what are we going to do about the change? Because let's just go back to the early 80s, the last when we got the rapid chloride test. Since then, cements have changed. The use of SCMs has significantly changed. Admixtures are a whole different world from what they were back then. Certainly de-icers and the things that we put on our pavements and the environment we ask our pavements to serve in has changed. And I've commented on the agency and industry staffing. So we've changed our materials, our exposure conditions, and our people, and we haven't changed our process. We haven't changed how we do concrete. All these other things have changed. We're stuck with old testing technologies and outdated, antiquated approaches to administering concrete projects. It just doesn't fit with concrete moving forward. Gordon showed a couple of these already, these MAT briefs. These are the two. If you note the dates that are on there, if you go to the CP Tech Center website, these are about 4 or 5 pages a piece. They give you some more background. They're excellent reading. They really are not bad reads. I won't say read them in bed before you go to sleep, because I think they're a much better read than that. And I encourage you to take the time. They're well worth the 5 or 10 minutes to read them.